by infantilizing children, of course, we're not empowering them. And Lenore Skenazy says, kids want independence, and they feel so empowered when a parent gives them a chance to go do something on their own for a change.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 378. I'm talking to David Pimentel, who is a law professor at the University of Idaho. We're going to talk about the issue of free-range kids and some of these issues that seem to have crept into our society now. Things that we don't remember being issues when we were kids, but they're issues now. How are you, David?
Doing fine, thanks.
Yeah, David. One thing I got to ask you, is. It seems like to me this is something that's crept up on us gradually. I mean, I don't think this really happened overnight. But now we live in this society where it seems that parents are expected to watch their children up until 24/7. And the age at which they're expected to watch their children is getting older and older. What can you say about this?
Well, there's been a culture shift in American society. I mean, when you and I were kids, it was common for children to go outside to play, and moms and dads would say, "Make sure you're home for dinner, or come home when the street lights come on," or whatever. And we'd ride our bikes in the neighborhood. Would go play pickup games of baseball or whatever, and of course, now we live in a society where if you play baseball, it's a part of an organized league that your parent drives you to. You don't even bicycle over there, right? You get driven to, strapped into an SUV, and then the parents stay and watch, and then give you, if you have snacks, they're in hermetically sealed packages, all for everybody's safety. Okay, so. I mean, it has been a change. There's no question there's a change. The kids used to walk to school, they used to bike to school, and now overwhelmingly they are driven to school. And the primary reason for that that's offered is safety. Even though there's the American Academy of Pediatrics once opined that the most dangerous way for a kid to get to school is in a private vehicle. They're actually safer if they ride the school bus or if they walk or whatever. But so there are perceptions of danger to kids. And there's been a lot of speculation about, why the changes. But it's hard to know where culture shifts like this come from. But there's no question that there's been a major change this way.
Yeah, and as I said, I really think it was gradual because my brothers went to Moundsville Junior High and in the 70s, 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. They were able to leave at lunchtime. When I went to Moundsville Junior High, we were not allowed to leave at lunchtime, right. And that was in the 80s. And I'm just thinking, it was just a change here, a change there.
Change. Yeah,
exactly. And now we're just where we are. And I would love to tell kids, nowadays to watch a sitcom like Leave It to Beaver or some sitcom, some black and white sitcom, and see how it used to be for kids. It makes no sense that we've gotten this way.
Well, it depends on your perspective and how you perceive risk, right? I mean, and this is parenting is an exercise in risk management, and I became interested in this topic when I heard Lenore Skenazy speak. She's the person who coined the term free-range kids and published the book that are urging people to give their kids a longer leash and say this is not healthy for kids to be helicoptered all the time. And after I heard her speak, I went up to her and I said, "Have you thought about legal liability issues here?" And she gave me this blank stare and said, "No, I never thought about that." And I said, "Well, I'm a law professor I can imagine a scenario in which someone follows your advice and gets into legal trouble. And with her encouragement and advice, I ended up writing an article published in 2012 entitled Criminal Child Neglect and the Free-Range Kid, in which I predicted that this could be problematic because as a practical matter, people tend to apply a standard of, I would never do that. If I would never do that with my kid, then what you're doing must be wrong, right? And so all it takes is a busybody, a neighbor seeing a kid walking to the park. You know, in a generation or two ago, that neighbor would look out on the kid, make sure the kid was okay. If they were concerned, they might call the kid's parents and say, just want to make sure, your kid's headed to the park. He looked fine to me. These days they call 911 and say, oh my gosh. Yeah. And then they feel very righteous about doing that because, they're protecting the kids. So now the parents are in trouble with the law. If the officer thinks that this is something that she would never do with her kids, then those parents may ultimately be arrested. Their kids may be taken from them. Until these things all get sorted out, because somebody thought that was inappropriate to leave a kid unsupervised in that way. And so part of it is that everybody's got cell phones. It's super easy to do. We're in an environment where we tell people, oh, if you see something, say something, as if that's a good thing.
Yes.
They want to err on the side of being careful. And so everybody errs on the side of intervening in this family because they say, oh, well, we just want to play it safe. Maybe everything's fine, but I just want to play it safe. When in fact, reporting and arresting and intervening in families does anything but keep kids safe. In fact, kids are victimized in very, very serious ways when their parents are placed under arrest or when those kids are put in foster care. When families are disrupted and threatened in this way, it does tremendous damage to a kid's sense of security. So it's a really disturbing sort of misplaced priority in my view. So I wrote the article and I suggested that, anything you do subjects your kids to risk. If you leave your kid at home for your 10-year-old at home for half an hour while you dash out to the store, yeah, there's risk associated with that, but it's nothing compared to the risk of taking that child with you and strapping him into a car. I mean, car accidents for decades were the number one killer of kids. Putting them in a moving vehicle is outrageously dangerous, but everybody would have said, oh, well, no, do the safe thing and take the kid with you. That doesn't make any sense. Parents are better placed than anyone to make these judgment calls. They know their kids. They know whether this kid is responsible, old enough. Yeah. But somehow, the neighbors or the police officer or the child protection caseworker seem to think they know better than the parents, and so they make these judgment calls and intervene in ways that are just really, really harmful to families and harmful to kids.
Michael Malice sometimes talks about the culture of snitching, and he says people snitch because they want to feel important.
Yeah.
And David, I've got to ask too: is it non-parents calling the police on these parents? Because I think parents might at least. A parent might think at least, well, I don't want somebody calling the police on me, so I won't call the police on them, And I can also tell you too, I was once left in the car with the motor running, and I was maybe 7 years old and mother just said, don't touch anything. And I just stayed in the car. Mm-hmm. It's really, and I can remember going to the library by myself when I was 7, and I see a sign in the library saying, no kids 10 and under in the library by themselves. I'm just thinking, this goes against all common sense, and I just, I don't know, what to say about this, but there was that case in Gastonia, where the kid, was walking to the store, and 10-year-old, and the police, of course, charged him. Oh, the kid got killed because they got hit by a car. Kids get hit by cars all the time,
Yeah, but they didn't charge the woman who was driving the car.
Yeah, they charged mom.
Parents. They charged the parents for letting the kids walk to the store. It's kind of crazy.
And that's the thing. Now parents are running scared, and they're not allowed to parent. And the question is, David, how are they expected to grow up?
Well, I mean, this is one of the serious challenges. Of course, they don't. They don't learn to exercise responsibility. Learn to exercise self-sufficiency. My sister-in-law is a dean. For her whole career, essentially, was a dean of undergraduate education at a university, and she and her colleagues get together and they talk about these teacup children. This change. They see it. They come in as freshmen in college and they don't know how to function. If they have a problem, they call their parents. And then the dean gets a call from the parents, and it's like, what? I mean, this is crazy. But by infantilizing children, of course, we're not empowering them. And Lenore Skenazy says, kids want independence, and they feel so empowered when a parent gives them a chance to go do something on their own for a change. So those things are these are powerful issues, and you're right to be asking the questions about it. But parents do, non-parents definitely do call and report. It happened to us actually a long time ago. We have.
Oh wow.
We had 4 children at the time, and we were bringing them into the house after going somewhere, and our 2-year-old was having a meltdown, was just throwing a tantrum, every parent parents differently. In our family, we ignore tantrums. If a child's throwing a tantrum, you ignore the child. They're doing it to get attention. Eventually they'll come around, right? So we were on the front porch of our house, and our 2-year-old was there throwing a tantrum, and we just ignored the child and walked in. And somebody driving by saw us obviously not caring at all that we had a child that was obvious to her in deep distress. So she called the police on us, and the police came in, and it was a scary thing to have a police officer there. I mean, it was very frightening to all of our children, because all of the children saw the police officer there questioning us and thought, gosh, are mom and dad in trouble, or are we in trouble? It was deeply upsetting to everybody involved, and that person who called the police on us, no doubt felt like she was doing the right thing. But this idea that you're a parent yourself actually works the other way sometimes. And let me explain how this works. Parents are very likely to blame other parents anytime something bad happens to that person's child. And the psychologists who studied this say what they're doing is they're trying to reassure themselves that this can't happen to my kid. I would never do that. And I can reassure myself that it could never happen to me because I would never do what they did. So it's their fault their kid was injured or killed. So this is the Legend Jenkins case, I think, that you're talking about. Parents want to think that their kid could never get hit by a car that way, and they reassure themselves by blaming the parent. And the psychologists have studied this in the legal realm in the context of rape prosecutions. Quite interestingly, they have observed a tendency of female jurors to blame the victim in a rape case, which sounds counterintuitive. You would think, oh my gosh, you would think a woman would be slow to blame another woman, but these women are trying to reassure themselves that this could never happen to them, and so they are thinking, well, I would never go out that time of night dressed like that in that neighborhood. Their desperate need to reassure themselves that this horrible, unthinkable thing could never happen to them leads them actually to blame the victim. And so I think this is a parallel concept.
Maybe so, yeah. But there are cases too where, I want to feel like I'm better than they are. And I can remember, my dad saying to me, I'm going to hear about it if you're not on the honor roll. He's going to hear about it from other parents that, because your kid's not on the honor roll or something like that. It's there really is this, and there is, this whole thing that it's like there's this pressure of your kids to be the right because of how they're going to be perceived by their own peers, among parents. And it is kind of weird,
and not healthy.
Have you done any are there good and bad states for this, or I'd also like to know, are there good and bad countries for this?
Yes. Yeah. The answer is yes to both questions. The most profound difference you see in the United States is not state to state, but the size of the city you're in. Yes. I had a meeting with at the American Bar Association annual conference, and lawyers who represent parents in cases like this were having a meeting, and they're saying, is there any place left in America where parents can still let their kids go play in the park? And the consensus was small town America. That's the only place.
Yes.
No, I live in a town that's it's got about 24,000 people, but most of them are college students. It's a college town. So there's only one high school and one middle school in the whole town. Okay.
Yes.
This is a town where kids still bicycle to school and still walk to school, and it's normal to see kids unaccompanied by adults going places. The high school opens up its campus at lunchtime, and it's just a block or two from downtown, and the kids go down and grab a slice of pizza or whatever from local businesses, right? It's kind of an idyllic, a throwback to an earlier era. But you get to bigger cities, and it can't happen. So the question in terms of which are good states, wait, there hasn't been good research done showing differences in the culture of different states, but some states have taken up this cause and have passed special legislation. And Lenore Skenazy has, and her organization, which is called Let Grow, has worked on this. I have collaborated with them and worked on this as well. The first state to pass such legislation was Utah in 2019. They passed legislation that they called a reasonable childhood independence legislation that essentially says, look, letting your kid walk to school or go to the park or play outside is not child neglect. I mean, they have a list of things that are not child neglect. And a number of other states have enacted similar laws or similarly intended laws now, about 8 states altogether. I'm thinking Texas and Oklahoma and Colorado passed a statute. What's interesting is you look at these states; they're not like red states or blue states. This is not an issue that, or this is an issue that kind of bridges the cultural divide in America.
Yes.
You've got people on the far right who homeschool their kids and say, "Don't tread on me. I'm gonna raise my kids the way I think is best to raise my kids, and I'm not going to let government come in and second guess my parenting. This is, my freedom, right? This is the way the right thinks about people. Some people on the far right think this way, and some people on the far left think, I'm not going to restrain my child's creativity. I'm going to let him follow his passions. I want to give him all the freedom to explore the world and do what's meaningful to him. And it's very much associated with their ideology is the idea that, I don't want the cops coming and telling my kids that they can't do things, right? Yeah. And so in some of these states, we've seen the legislation pass unanimously. I mean, how often does that happen in politics today, that you get unanimous consent?
Yeah.
So these states where this kind of legislation has been passed are presumably friendlier states to parents who want to do free-range parenting. But one of the reasons that I was interested in this topic is because we have lived abroad. We lived overseas for about 6 years. I worked for the United Nations. I did court reform in post-conflict countries. And we have 6 children. We had 2 of our children were born actually in Europe, in the Netherlands. But it's very common in the Netherlands to see kids riding their bikes anywhere and everywhere, or taking public transit. Very young kids, just on a city bus and taking it across town. And so when we came back to the United States, it was startling to us, to the culture shock we went through. When we lived in Sarajevo, Bosnia, my wife went to the little grocery on the corner, the little deli on the corner there with our 5-year-old. It was in kindergarten that year. And the woman there, but they were just buying some eggs, right? And the woman who was running the store said to her, our Bosnian wasn't great, but it was pretty clear what she was saying. She was saying, look, next time you don't need to come. You can send your 5-year-old. I know you now.
Wow.
That was a 5-year-old. We saw our landlady in Sarajevo send her 3-year-old to the bakery, her 3-year-old grandchild. And what she did, I mean, it didn't involve crossing a street. It was just down the block. But she put money in the hand of that 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old toddled off to the bakery, came back with change in one hand and bread in the other, and apparently had done this a whole bunch of times. The bakery knew her, knew what this was, and it was normal. So again, we were kind of shocked at first, and then we kind of got used to the idea. Our kids got used to the idea. We come back to the United States in 2007. and our kids are amazed. They're in high school and they need a ride everywhere because they can't be expected to get themselves from point A to point B, and they're 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my gosh. They're also, Japan is a really interesting contrast, and there's a Netflix show called Old Enough. I don't know if you've heard about this, but
I've heard about this, but I know they have it like My First Errand.
Yeah. And it's delightful and charming and amazing as they send little tiny kids off to run errands and
you know what the image I have in my head, David, is I've been to Peru and seeing 5-year-old kids rowing canoes on the river.
Right.
And these are not small rivers, and they're rowing these canoes on the river. And I do find it kind of crazy that in some of these more third world places, they'll teach kids to ride canoes, but I don't know why in the world they would never teach them to swim. But which I don't believe in forced learning of a lot of things, but I do believe that is one thing you have to teach your kids. Teach them to swim.
They're going to be around water, yeah.
Just so if they're ever in a bad situation, they know what to do. But kids and in some of these places too, you look at them and some of these are fairly rough places. They're not, the criminals really don't mess with kids all that much, but they'll certainly see things happen. And this is a relatively new thing too. It's not really something that ever existed in our history.
Yeah.
Do you think there was an agenda behind this? I mean, maybe the cultural Marxists who really want to destroy the family, and this is one way to do it, but and just putting it.
I haven't seen any evidence that it's anyone's agenda. I think this is something that's happened. I mean, in some of my articles, I blame the media. What do you do? The faces on the milk cartons was something that made everybody think every single day while you're having breakfast, you're thinking about the fact that kids are disappearing, right?
Yeah, I know one lady who really blames John Walsh for this.
Yeah.
Because he was promoting, every kid's in danger and all this stuff. And because he had his son get kidnapped. And the fact of the matter is, David, a lot of these alleged kidnappings are usually non-custodial family members.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's very rare when kids are kidnapped by actual criminals who would harm them. I mean, the non-custodial parent just wants to see his kids. And of course, that's caused by divorce. And we could, and most kids are runaways. The missing kids are often runaways. They're not.
Exactly. But it didn't stop us from teaching kids about stranger danger and teaching them not to trust strangers, which interestingly, in some ways has made children less safe. And the reason is a child that is lost will not approach a stranger and ask for help. Because they're told, whatever you do, don't. And I was involved on one occasion in a wilderness area in southern Utah. It was a family gathering, and a child had wandered off, and we lost sight of the child. And a sheriff's posse was called out to search the mountainside for the kid. And the members of the posse says, it's really hard to find a kid these days because they will hide from the people who are hunting for them. The people,
that's not good.
Rescuers, they will literally hide from them because they've been taught to fear strangers. Maybe a child should be a little suspicious of an adult who approaches them and takes an unnatural interest in them. But a child should never hesitate to approach a stranger, because the chances that the stranger they happen to approach just happens to be one of these strangers who wants to kidnap them, that chance is almost statistically zero. And children can certainly be served far better by talking to strangers, by being willing to talk to strangers.
Yeah. So asking them for directions, asking them how you get to the store, someplace like that.
I'm lost. I can't find my mom. Can you help me?
In my days, if you were a lost kid, you might just say, "Hey, I'm lost. Can you give me 10 cents to call my parents?" Because the kids know how to use the phone. I do think if we ever want to have free range kids, we probably ought to figure out a way to bring back payphones. But and I don't know if you heard that story about that kid out in Arizona. He was 2 years old and he got lost, and this dog he met up with this dog, and the dog let him, and he just walked with the dog 7 miles back to somebody's house.
Wow.
And then of course, when he got back to the house, they called the police and said, "Hey, we found this kid," and of course, by then he was severely dehydrated, but that was the word, but he was fine.
That's a great story. I don't know that story. I don't want to know the rest of that story because I'm really afraid that some parent got arrested over it. But
and I hope that's not the case. I remember, I was watching, a while back, I was watching the movie about Jessica McClure, the girl who fell down the well in Texas back in 1987, and nobody was charged with anything for that.
Yeah. It was just a tragic accident. Tragic accidents happen. But if we want to think that tragic accidents can't happen, then anytime something terrible happens, we have to find somebody to blame.
Yeah, and sometimes these things happen. Dave. The same thing too is as I've said, kids got to skin their knees and things like that, and maybe even break a bone. And at least when I was growing up, if the kid had a broken arm, he'd go in, take him to the doctor and it'd be done. Nowadays, they'll take the kid and interrogate them for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And parents just figure, well, it's easier just to make sure they're safe and don't break their arms, because and there's lots of cases like this now where you have this people who are victim shopping, and
and
a
lot of them are genuinely motivated by desires to keep children safe. And you see a child come in who's bruised and with a broken bone, and they think, gosh, I sure hope this child isn't being abused. And sometimes there's a nostalgia for the 1950s, and people say, kids were so much safer back in the 1950s. Well, they weren't so much safer back in the 1950s. Kids fell out of trees and broke their arms and stuff like that, but nobody treated it as a serious concern. Tragically, when back in the 1950s, when a child was being abused, people did not intervene, because it's none of my business, right? It's those parents or whatever, and they'd say, none of my business. I'm staying out of this. And so, starting with the 1960s, there was a heightened concern about child abuse, and that may be one of the things that started this cultural change. I was mentioning earlier the media. I mean, the media knows that scaring people sells, right? I mean, this is anger and fear are things that sell your broadcast, right? So what do you get? You get a television. They watching television in the 1980s, back in the days when we watched television and didn't just stream everything. That break in between shows at 9 o'clock and say, a child disappears on the Upper West Side. Is your child next? Tune in at 11, right? Well, is your child next? Tune in at 11 is going to guarantee you tune in at 11. We've reached the point now where if there's a child disappearance, it's national news. It's not local news. It's national news, in part because it is so rare that it actually happens.
Certainly it was big national news when Charles Lindbergh's baby was kidnapped. I mean that was a while back, but I wasn't alive then, but. And, I can remember my mother, who was born in 1934, told me a story about one time how a police officer showed up at the school. And apparently it was because the parents were making this kid sleep under the porch because he wet his bed. And she said that was why. And this actually was a case where the police intervened. And this must have been
interesting.
This must have been in the late 30s or early 40s. So it did happen in cases that I think were severe. But there wasn't really this attitude, that we'll report everything, and now it's, it is, and it is unfortunate, the other thing too, David, the stats numbers show it. The most dangerous thing for a child nowadays is a step. That's the truth. They're much better off with their biological mom and biological dads.
I see what you mean. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. I mean, that's where most of the abuse happens. Certainly the sexual abuse tends to happen by stepdads.
And I know plenty of great step parents too, but it's just,
and that's unfortunate.
It is all unfortunate, but my parents never made me wear my seatbelt, and kids rode in the back of trucks. It's, you could even just go back and watch the 1976 version of the Bad News Bears. It's, I guess we don't have that much time left, but how do we get out of this? Just more state laws or what? Because
well, in some ways I celebrate the state laws. In some ways I criticize them because, I mean, what Utah did with that legislation is it said, okay, look, these things are not child neglect, and they list them, right? Which would suggest that anything else could be, right? And that parents can do these things with their kids because the state has now decided to let them do it, as if the state were the ultimate arbiter of what's okay for kids to do, instead of the parent being the ultimate arbiter of what kids can do. But it's just about impossible to write a law, and believe me, I've tried, that returns discretion to the hands of the parents. Just about any way you try to write that law, it gives a blank check to true child abusers, and you can't do that, and nobody wants to support that, and nobody wants to subject children to that, and unfortunately that does happen in our society, and we want good strong laws in place that allow intervention and discipline, legal consequences for the abusers. So it's really tough. I don't know what the way out of this is. I mean, part of it is public information, and Lenore Skenazy's group is doing a great job, I think, of getting the word out. I have tried with my articles to get the word out that this is unhealthy for kids, and there are a number of people.
Well, David, the other thing too is, you notice when mom and dads are driving their kids everywhere, have you ever noticed that maybe this is why kids are getting so fat?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Kids aren't riding bikes or aren't biking. I mean, you lived in the Netherlands, which is a heavy biking culture, and it's amazing, and up to 5 miles, bikes are great. I mean, I wouldn't want to use a bicycle for a really long trip, but kids in college or or around town, around a small town, or I mean, some people back in my days, they used to brag, I rode my bike 20 miles yesterday. And then, just so they could say they did it, it was
right.
I don't think you have much time left. Do you have anything else you want to say, or?
I'm delighted. I mean, I'm happy to talk to you today because I'm eager to draw more attention to this issue.
Yeah.
And I'm very much alarmed that we're living in a society where parents don't feel like they can trust their instincts anymore. I mean, there should be a debate. There is a debate and has been for a long time about what constitutes good parenting. Dating back 100 years ago, there were people saying, "Oh, parents shouldn't hug their children. That's bad for the children," or what, which sounds ridiculous to us today. But Benjamin Spock published his path-breaking book on parenting and childcare, urging parents to trust their instincts. I mean, what do you think is best for your child? Trust that, right? But we're living in an environment now where parents are choices for the children are not driven by the parents' own sense of what this child is capable of, or what is best for this child, or what would be safest for this child. But they're making these judgments by how is this going to look if somebody calls the cops, or how is this going to look to the neighbors, and if the law starts enforcing those kinds of standards, then the debate and the discussion and the very productive sort of dialogue that we should be having in our society about what's best for kids and what's the best way to raise kids is effectively shut down. The only way you can raise your kids in our society is hyperprotective parenting, because if you do anything less than that, you're going to be in trouble with the law. That I think is hugely destructive. And so I am working on the law side to try and keep the legal system.
Well, and Jonathan Hayes, for example, has talked about how kids are so anxious nowadays, and I think it's really. I would venture to say that a 15-year-old 100 years ago was probably more mature than a 25-year-old today. It's just it's really gotten to be that way, and it just. I think part of it maybe is just because they're easier to control. We want to have citizens that we can control and rule over. And
maybe I don't see it that much as an agenda, but the damage is being done in either way. In either case, I actually went back because I got so tired of hearing people say, Well, yeah, sure. We gave kids longer leashes back in the 1950s, but the world was a safer place back then. I went back and compiled statistics on child mortality, and they have gone down in every single category steadily, gone down from the 1950s to the present time, except in one area, and that's kids are minors ages 12 to 17, if I'm remembering the data right, are getting hit by cars at higher rates now than ever. And my suspicion is that these kids have never been taught to cross the street. When I was 5 years old and I walked to kindergarten, I was told you stop, you look, you listen, you look both ways. When it's clear, you cross, right? But now a 5-year-old is never given that instruction because a 5-year-old never crosses the street without holding an adult's hand. And eventually they get to be like 11 and you can't hold their hands anymore, but you never bothered to teach them how to cross the street, right? Safely.
Well, and I knew kids, and you probably knew kids who were in houses that had those horrible old refrigerators, and that's why, some of these things, I guess I'm kind of glad, though, even though I'm a libertarian, I'm not really unhappy that those kind of refrigerators were banned in 1956, because kids would play hide and seek and then they'd hide in the refrigerator and then they couldn't get out.
Right.
And because they were so insulated, the kids would scream, but nobody would hear them, and kids would suffocate. But my aunt had one of those fridges up until the 90s. It's and so a lot of things have gotten safer for kids.
Oh, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, cars have seatbelts now. My grandma's car when I was a kid didn't have seatbelts. I mean, they hadn't even been installed, and seatbelts are a good thing. I'm all in favor of seatbelts. I'm in favor of helmets in lots of circumstances. Although I'm critical of mandatory helmet laws, but that's a separate issue. But we should be concerned about safety. But a lot of this hyperprotective parenting is not promoting safety, and I think it's doing the opposite because our kids are not able to fend for themselves. We haven't taught them. Our society is not teaching them to take responsibility for their own safety because there's always some adult who's taking responsibility for their safety. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's, as you say, it's infantilizing our young people, and even at age 25, how functional are they as independent adults? It's a concern. It's a concern that we're not preparing them for the world. And if we're not preparing them for the world, then there's reason to worry about the world.
Yeah, we're definitely not. So where can we find you out there on the web? Anywhere you have a site or anything, or any books or no?
I've got a number of articles that are available freely on the web. If you search David Pimentel Free Range Kids, Pimentel Free Range Kids Law, or University of Idaho and Pimentel, you'll find me, and you'll find links to all my articles. So thank you for talking to me today. I wish I could give you more time, but
thank you for having the time. Well, please like the show, subscribe to the channel, go buy my novel Escape from the Village, check out my Substack. People are giving me money at Buy Me a Coffee. I'm Chris Baker. We're out.